The first person to look at me that night wasn't my husband. It was the most powerful man in the room, and within seconds, he would bring an entire ballroom to silence by saying words that shattered the life I thought I understood. "I've been looking for you for 20 years. At that moment, I didn't even know his name. "My name is Lisa Walker. I'm 43 years old, and for nearly 2 decades, I'd mastered a single skill: becoming invisible. Not because I wanted to disappear, because it was easier than being told I was taking up too much space. My husband, Richard, had spent 18 years polishing his image while quietly sanding away mine. Before every company event, he'd remind me of the same rules. Smile, don't interrupt, don't say anything embarrassing. By now, I knew the script by heart. The Whitmore Group's 25th anniversary gala was no different. The ballroom sparkled beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. Waiters floated between guests, carrying silver trays loaded with champagne, while a string quartet played soft classical music that blended into the conversations of executives discussing promotions, investments, and golf courses. Richard loved nights like these. He became louder, funnier, more charming, the version of himself he reserved for people who could advance his career. I became the accessory. Within minutes, he'd disappeared into a circle of senior managers, leaving me beside a marble column holding a drink I never intended to finish. It didn't bother me anymore. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Every marriage teaches you something. Mine taught me how to shrink without anyone noticing. About half an hour into the evening, Richard crossed the room toward me, wearing the tight smile I recognized too well. He leaned close enough that no one else could hear. "For heaven's sake, Lisa." His voice remained pleasant, but his eyes weren't. "You look miserable. Stand up straight, smile at someone. You're making me look bad." Before I could answer, he patted my shoulder like I was a child needing correction and walked away again. I watched him disappear into another crowd. Strangely, I didn't feel angry, only tired. Tired of pretending that this was what love looked like. Tired of convincing myself that being ignored was somehow the same as being respected. Then the room changed. The music kept playing, yet conversations began fading one by one until only whispers remained. Heads turned toward the grand entrance. Even Richard stopped talking. Charles Whitmore had arrived. The billionaire founder rarely attended company functions anymore, making every appearance feel like history unfolding in real time. He greeted employees with polite smiles as photographers snapped pictures. Then something unexpected happened. He stopped. His eyes swept across the ballroom, paused, then locked onto mine. Everything inside me tightened. He looked as though he'd seen someone rise from the dead. Without another word, he excused himself from the executives surrounding him and walked directly toward me. People instinctively stepped aside. The closer he came, the more confused I became. Surely he was looking for someone behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. No one. When he finally stood in front of me, his eyes were glistening. For several long seconds, he simply stared, as if trying to convince himself I was real. Then he gently reached for my hand. His fingers trembled. "So it really is you," he whispered. The emotion in his voice was unmistakable. "I thought I'd never find you again." The ballroom fell completely silent. I'm sorry," I stammered, pulling in a nervous breath. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." A tear rolled down his cheek. "No." He shook his head slowly. "I could never forget the woman who saved my life." Across the room, Richard stood frozen, his confident smile gone. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked like the invisible one. No one spoke. 300 people stood frozen beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers, watching one of the country's most respected businessmen wipe tears from his face while holding the hand of a woman nobody had noticed 10 seconds earlier. I wanted to pull away. Instead, I stood there completely overwhelmed. "I'm sorry," I whispered again. "I honestly don't remember you." A gentle smile crossed Charles Whitmore's face. "I was hoping you'd say that." His voice carried no disappointment, only gratitude. 20 years ago, I wasn't the man standing before you tonight. The room remained silent as he continued. I was 39, recently divorced, drinking far too much, and convinced my life had already fallen apart. One stormy night, I lost control of my car on Route 9. It flipped into a ditch. The driver's side was crushed, and I couldn't move. As he spoke, fragments of forgotten memories stirred inside me. Rain, a flashing pair of taillights, mud beneath my shoes. I thought I was going to die, Charles continued quietly. Then a young woman stopped her car. Suddenly, I remembered. I had been 23, exhausted after finishing a double shift at a roadside diner. It had been pouring rain, and every sensible part of me wanted to keep driving home. But I'd seen those headlights pointing toward the sky. I couldn't ignore them. You climbed into that ditch without thinking about your own safety, Charles said, his eyes never leaving mine. You forced open my door with your bare hands. Your palms were bleeding, but you refused to stop. The memories returned one after another, his blood on my scarf, the freezing rain soaking through my uniform, the ambulance siren, the doctors rushing him through emergency doors. I stayed until they said he'd live, I murmured. Then I looked up, startled. I left before you woke up. Charles nodded. You signed the hospital papers with only one name, Lisa. No address, no phone number, nothing else. A soft laugh escaped him. I searched every diner within miles. Years later, when I finally had the money, I hired investigators. I never stopped looking. I felt my cheeks grow warm. I only did what anyone would have done. No, he replied firmly. Most people would have kept driving. His words echoed across the ballroom. You gave a stranger another chance at life and expected absolutely nothing in return. He turned toward the crowd. If she hadn't stopped that night, there would be no Whitmore group. Gasps spread across the room. No company. No thousands of employees. No celebration tonight. Every eye shifted toward me. For years, I had believed my life had been ordinary. Now hundreds of strangers were looking at me as though I had quietly changed theirs. Charles faced me again. I've waited 20 years to say 2 words. He smiled through tear-filled eyes. Thank you. Emotion tightened my throat. Before I could answer, Charles looked toward Richard. Mr. Walker, he said calmly, did you know your wife once saved my life? Richard swallowed hard. No, she never told me. The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. Charles studied him for a long moment. That's remarkable. Richard forced an uneasy smile. I suppose she just never thought it was important. Charles slowly shook his head. No. His voice remained polite, but every word carried quiet weight. She didn't tell the story because she wasn't looking for recognition. Then he looked directly at me. That kind of character is extraordinarily rare. He extended his arm. Mrs. Walker, would you honor me by joining me at the head table tonight? I've spent 2 decades hoping to properly thank the woman who gave me a future. I glanced toward Richard. For once he had nothing to say. No instructions. No criticism. No carefully practiced smile. Only silence. I slipped my hand through Charles's arm and walked beside him across the ballroom. The applause began slowly. Then it grew louder and louder. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't following behind someone else's shadow. I was finally walking in my own light.